All righty. Now, peace and power elevation be to all the beautiful people out there. This your girl Tiffany coming through here live in effect. Live in effect. So I want to give thanks to everybody that been subscribing to my channel, share my channel, like my channel, all that great stuff. So before I continue, I want to make sure that everything's okay and adjustable with the sound because I've been having trouble lately with the sound. So I want to make sure everything is adjustable and it's okay. So give me a moment, please. All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started. All right. Once again, peace and power elevation be to all of you beautiful people out there. And before I start the channel, make sure you guys subscribe and like and share the channel, all that great stuff. Make sure you subscribe and like the channel and share the channel. All right. So today's topic, I'll continue dealing with the unsung heroes, right? Or the people that was unparalleled in our community, those who were activists, pan-Africanists, psychologists, psychiatrists, philosophers, all of that. I'm dealing with those subject matters, okay? So it's a long list of those who were philosophers, psychiatrists, and psychologists and activists in our community that have not gained recognition by the mainstream public, you know. And when it comes to learn about our history, where we come from as a people, etc., you only get selective of information. You only get the narratives that the mainstream wants you to know. And when they tell you about those individuals, they don't tell you the whole entire thing. They only tell you just a little bit, just enough to romanticize things. Okay. So I just want to be able to make sure that we get a lot of information drawn into the public and bring into the limelight. So I'm not going to be able to present every single thing because it's plethora of sources out there. When I say plethora, I do mean plethora. Okay, it's so much information regard to our ancestors, our history, and a lot of things that we have done. But it has to take the people to have the initiative to want to look things up for themselves, to want to find out, to want to come across stuff. And it's so funny. People use Google these days. We all use Google because it's the most popular search engine, right? But you can find so much stuff on Google. You can find so much stuff, you know, all you gotta do is type it in and it just pop up, right? Just like Google Scholar, you can find a lot of stuff on Google Scholar. But I think a lot of things have been overlooked at because it don't bring entertainment to individuals or romanticism. But everything is not going to be romanticized, especially if you're dealing with history. It's not going to be always about romanticism. It's not going to always be feel good rhetoric. And that's what a lot of people set themselves back on, looking for feel good rhetoric. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. So now the subject is Vicki Garvin. So Vicki Garvin was very active in the community. She was a Pan-Africanist, and she described herself as a working class internationalist, and she was a political activist as well. All right, so there's a lot about this lady. She came during the time of the Great Depression. She has worked alongside with, as a matter of fact, she actually knew Malcolm X. She knew Malcolm X early on before Malcolm X became Malcolm X. Right? She was trying to get him involved in political movement while he was in the streets, but he was not interested. He wasn't trying to go for it. Peace to Brother Chauncey. How you doing, Brother Chauncey? Thank you for coming through. Shout out to Brother Chauncey. All right. So let me go ahead and get started. Okay. Now, who was Vicki Garvin? So Vicki Garvin, according to the wiki source, she was born on December 18th, 1915, and she died on June 11th, 2007. And she was an American political activist, a Pan-Africanist, and a self-described working-class internationalist. While growing up in a working-class family during the height of Great Depression, Garvin was exposed early on onto the realities of both poverty and racial exploitation. Garvin became a prominent organizer in the Black left during the height of McCarthyism, before traveling to Nigeria, Ghana, and China. In Ghana, Garvin was a member of a committee who received Malcolm X and created his itinerary. Since Garvin had previously met him in Harlem as a lifelong activist and radical intellectual, Garvin created direct links between Black power politics, Pan-Africanism, and Third World liberation. Now, what is McCarthyism? Let's look at that. So, McCarthyism, right? According to the source, it's the practice of making accusation of subversion and treason, especially when related to communism and socialism. The term originally referred to the controversial practices and policies of U.S. Senator Joseph McCarthy, and has its origin in the period in the United States known as the Second Red Scare, lasting from the late 1940s through the 1950s. It was characterized by heightened political repression and persecution of left-wing individuals, and a campaign spreading fear of alleged communist and socialist influence on American institutions, and espionage by so pardon me, excuse me. So McCarthyism began to decline mainly due to Joseph McCarthy's gradual loss of public popularity and credibility after several of his accusations were found to be false, and sustained opposition from the U.S. Supreme Court, led by Chief Justice Earl Warren, on human rights grounds. The Warren Court made a series of rulings on civil and political rights that overturned several key laws and legislative directives, and helped bring an end to Second Red Scare. Historians have suggested since the 1980s that as McCarthy's involvement was less central than that of others, a different and more accurate term should be used instead that more accurately conveys the breadth of the phenomenon, and that the term McCarthyism is now outdated. So it goes on to say Ellen Schrecker has suggested that Hooverism at the FBI head J. Edgar Hoover is more appropriate. Others, including Stanley Cutler, have instead suggested the term McCarthyism after Senator Pat McCarthy of Nevada, a key legislative figure in the movement. All right, so that is McCarthyism. Okay, so let's continue. It says her early life, she was born in Richmond, Virginia. Okay, her father, Wallace J. Holmes, worked as a plasterer, and her mother was a domestic worker. The Holmes family eventually settled in Harlem in search of better job opportunities. During this time, Garvin's father was unable to find work as a plasterer, and Garvin's mother battled increasingly unfair wages and working conditions. Garvin's family often moved from apartment to apartment in order to avoid eviction. In an effort to alleviate her family financial hardship, Garvin spent many of her summers working in the garment industry. All right. So it says Garvin attended Wiley High School for Girls, where she founded a Black History Club. After graduating at the age of 16, Garvin attended Hunter College, where she received a degree in political science. In 1940, 4 years after graduating college, Garvin decided to attend Smith College to receive her master's degree. She became the first African American woman to receive a graduate degree in economics from Smith College. During her time at Smith, Garvin was heavily influenced by her studies in Marxist economics and remained heavily involved in student activism. So it goes further down to say, union and activism and communist organizing. Vicki Garvin was first exposed to labor union activism when she joined the National War Labor Board in 1942. As World War II came to an end, Garvey became engaged in union work through her position as the National Research Director for a Congress of Industrial Organization, Union, the United Office and Professional Workers of America. She joined the Harlem chapter of the Communist Party USA in 1947. During her time in the Communist Party, she often became embroiled in conflict with the racism of white Communist Party members. Around this time, she married a fellow union organizer, and although the marriage was brief, she kept her husband's last name of Garvin. During this period, Garvin first met Malcolm X, who was a bartender at the time, and she tried to unsuccessfully to convince him to join the Communist Party. In the 1950s, she worked as a vice president of the National Negro Labor Council, as an executive secretary in the Council of New York chapter. Garvin advocated for Black women, Black labor rights, and criticized the CIO's decision to disown the UOPWA for its communist politics. And it goes on to say, due to Garvin's advocacy and outspokenness against the government's Cold War policies, anti-communist repression continued to burden Garvin's political and personal life. In 1953, she was called before the House Un-American Activities Committee. In 1955, the NNLC disbanded due to political pressure. Garvin left the Communist Party in 1957. All right. So it talks about her traveling to Ghana, Nigeria, and China. Let's see. So it's in the face of McGarveyism and rising of anti-communist segment, McCarthyism, and rising anti-communist segment, Garvin had limited outlets to continue union work or community-based organizing. In 1960, Garvin discovered an opportunity to work in Nigeria, which had just gained independence from the United Kingdom. While living in Lagos, Garvin experienced this disillusionment with the realities of neo-colonialism, which left Nigerians impoverished and divided despite their nation's independence from formal colonial rule. By 1963, Garvin had decided to leave Nigeria and travel to Accra, Ghana, which under the leadership of Kwame Nkrumah had become a hub for Black activism and Pan-Africanism. Garvin was roommates with Maya Angelou and Alice Wyndham, and was part of a Black intellectual network that included Julian Maffield, W.E.B. and Shirley Du Bois, and Ole Harrington. Garvin's international and interest in Third World Revolution was developed during this time. When Malcolm X arrived in Ghana in 1964, Garvin, who had already met Malcolm X in Harlem, was part of a committee that shaped his experience in Ghana and accompanied him to his meeting with diplomats from Algeria, China, and Cuba. So in 1964, 2 years before the military coup that would overthrow Nkrumah, Garvin received an offer from the Chinese ambassador to visit the People's Republic of China. Garvin moved to Shanghai, China, where she taught English at the Shanghai Foreign Language Institute. She also created the university courses in African American history. The Cultural Revolution in 1966 and the subsequently turmoil in higher education caused Garvin to lose her job, causing her to take up a position as the editor of an English newspaper in Beijing. So after the release of Miles in 1968, statement in support of Afro-American struggle against violence repression, Garvin was invited back to Shanghai by her old students to give a speech at a rally. Garvin's experience speaking in front of millions of Chinese who were rallying in support of Black Power solidified her commitment to third world solidarity and transnational liberation movements. Okay? Then it goes on to talk about her return to America. So Vicki Garvin returned to the United States in 1970, relocating to Newark, New Jersey, where her husband, LaBelle Bergman, whom she had married in China. Garvin used her skills and experience in organizing to remain heavily involved in political activism. She was the director of the Tri-City Citizen Union and shortly thereafter worked as the area leader for community interaction at the Center for Community Health Systems of Columbia University. In 1974, after leaving her position at Columbia, Garvin became an editor for the New China, a paper published by the U.S. China People's Friendship Association. Okay, Garvin and Bergman located to Chicago in the late 1970s, where Garvin joined the Revolutionary Communist Party and served as a mentor to its inexperienced membership. In 1980s, Garvin left Chicago in light of her divorce with Bergman and moved to Jamaica, Queens, New York, where she joined the National Black United Front. Garvin was hailed by fellow members for her strategic thinking and negotiation of ideological differences within the group. Harnessing her decades of political experience in both communist organizing and transnational politics, Garvin played a significant role in shaping the NBUF's ideology. And Garvin was a member of the NBUF's Women Committee, which advocated for women's equality. And in 1985, Garvin, along with the NBUF Women Committee, traveled to the United Nations World Conference on Women held in Kenya. All right. And it says throughout the 1980s and 1990s, Garvin remained active and supported in groups such as the Sisters Against South African Apartheid, Black Workers for Justice, and the Black Radical Congress. She was also a participant in protests and rallies in support for political prisoners such as Mumia Abu-Jamal. So on June 11 of 2007, Garvin passed away from serious illness. All right, so you can find out more information right here at the bottom. It's called Refilis. So this is the sources down here. You can find at the bottom of the page. And also you can look at further reading at the very bottom as well. Okay. All right, so now with that being said, as you can see, there were people who have not only joined the Pan-African movement, but also identified with the Communist Party. So many people wonder, well, why so many black people at that time were very intrigued by the Communist Party? Because the idea of get rid of oppression. So they figured that the communist and socialist parties was the way to go because it stood on the principle against oppression. So that's why so many black people got into studying Marxism and all of that. And they went to places like China and Ghana, but particularly China, because China, the Chinese government is a communist government. Okay. So they figure, well, this is the way, or this is a solution to fight against the oppression of people of color at that time. But today, you still got people who believe in the Communist and Socialist Party. I believe in socialism myself personally. However, the reality is, because we do not live in such a society that's predicated on socialism or communism, that's not going to happen. Because that means that you will have to be willing to put up a fight. That means you have to put yourself in danger. You have to put your life on the line. Or otherwise, it's just idealism. And that's all they are, idealism. Because we live in a capitalist system. We live under the concept of capitalism. Okay? And if you try to change the economic system around, you're messing with people's pockets. The question becomes, do you really have what it takes to put yourself in that type of predicament where your life is dependent on it? No, you don't. So at this point, we just can only incorporate some principles, but you'll never change this economic system because it's going to take a major fight that ain't nobody's ready for. And I'm just being realistic about that. Okay. All right. So let's go on to the next source that I have available. So as you can see here, I'm pull it up. Okay, so as you can see here, this come from Black Women's Activism on the Left. .webly.com. All right. Okay, so look, let's see what else they talking about on this website. All right, so going down here, what said Vicki, passionate about finding the intersection between labor and race, graduated from Hunter College and became an active member of CIO's United Office and Professional Workers of American Union. She remained politically active by joining the Don't Buy Where You Can't Work protest to gain employment for Black workers in businesses along 125th Street in Harlem. Garvin moved to Northampton, Massachusetts in 1940 and studied Marxist economics in Smith College, right? So after World War II, Garvin joined the left-leaning Fair Employment Practice Committee and became immersed with Communist Party supported activism. So Garvin was a strong advocate for Black women workers and Black liberation, as well as powerful voice of resistance to emerging Cold War politics. All right. So her choice to join the Communist Party reflected her own idealism and growing political commitment to working class struggles. So as you can see, these are pictures of protests that have been taking place. Right. And that's Adam Clayton Powell right here in front. Adam Clayton Powell. All right, then. So you can check this information out on this website. It's called Wibly.com. And that's her later on in life right here. So here's well, before I get to the book, I want to get to the article. So here's the article. It's called "If You're in a Country That's Progressive, the Woman is Progressive: Black Women Radicals and the Making of the Politics and Legacy of Malcolm X" by Eric McDuffie and Kamazi Woodard. All right, so this is volume 36, number 3. He, the One We All Knew, summer 2013. That's when it came out. So it was 33 pages from 507 to 539. All right. So let's pull up the full screen. All right, so here's the full screen. Oops. See if I can. So it says, if you're in a country that's progressive, the Black woman is progressive, or the woman is progressive. Black women radicals and the making of politics and legacy of Malcolm X. So Vicki Garvin often talked about the days when she tried to recruit Malcolm X, then known as Detroit Red, into the 1940s Harlem Black left. Garvin first met young Malcolm in Harlem when he worked as a popular bartender at Small Paradise. From that beginning, Garvin and Malcolm developed ongoing conversation about revolution and political economic that lasted from the 1940s to December of 1964, when they had their last conversation at the Organization of African Unity Summit in Cairo, Egypt. From the outset, Garvin saw Malcolm's political promise and leadership potential. Malcolm and his buddy Red Fox, the comedian, were down and out, but already attending meetings on the left and reading communist literature. Now, for those of you that don't know, that Malcolm X and Red Fox were best friends. They were best friends, and Red Fox was considered as Chicago Red, although he was from St. Louis, Missouri, but he was living in Chicago at one point, and so him and Malcolm, lived in Harlem together. They used to hustle, hang out with each other, all that. They were best friends. But anyways, the comedian were down and out, already attending meetings on the left and reading communist literature. Taking the next step in his recruitment, Vicki Garvin took Malcolm to more meetings and lectures, and he listened respectfully. However, at one lecture, when Garvin thought the time was ripe for his enlistment in the revolutionary cause, Malcolm stood up after the talk, put his hat and coat on, and headed for the door. Garvin implored him, "Malcolm, why don't you stay and join the Communist Party?" Nodding towards the speaker, he responded, "Well, if he can't speak any better than that." The young Malcolm apparently did not wish to join the Communist Party. Nonetheless, their conversation continued through the years, and as by the mid-1950s, Vicki Garvin flowered into a prominent Black radical intellectual with an extraordinary background as a political activist, community organizer, trade union leader, journalist, and world traveler. All right, so they were both flowering as successful organizers in the Jim Crow North. Garvin was at the helm of the National Negro Labor Council, and Malcolm was a rising minister in the Nation of Islam. Ultimately, Malcolm's study of comparative revolution and socialism led him in his last years to try to women such as Vicki Garvin, his mother, Louise Little, his wife, Betty Savage, and Queen Mother, Audley Moore, and preeminent figure in 20th century Black nationalists. Pan-Africanism and communism played a crucial role in helping Malcolm develop a theory of Black self-determination, Pan-Africanism, and internationalism. These women served as his teachers and collaborators. They were also critical in keeping his legacy alive following his assassination in February 1965, embracing an idiosyncratic Black radical politics that drew from Black nationalism, Black feminism, and Marxism, third worldism, and their own lived experience. They forged an anti-racist, anti-sexist, anti-capitalist, and anti-imperialistic position. These women were at the cutting edge of developing a blueprint for Black liberation in the anti-colonial age of the Bandung Conference of 1955, Third World politics, and radical Pan-Africanism. Garvin and Moore understood that women of color would play a key role in forging a new world. Malcolm's Garveyite upbringing, exchanges with Black women radicals, and travel overseas, as well as developments across the Badon world, nurture his own internationalist perspective. Throughout his tenures in the Nation of Islam and following his break from it in early 1964, Malcolm sought to forge a Black radical protest movement organically connected to African American urban communities and linked with third world revolutionary states across Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Near the end of his life, Malcolm's position on internationalism, particularly on the importance of women of color as a barometer for measuring global Black freedom, for the most part, the biographies of Malcolm X had either neglected or marginalized and even plagiarized the voice of revolutionary women who were formative in the radicalization of Malcolm X and critical in keeping his legacy alive. Part of this neglect can be explained by the cursory treatment of women in the now classic autobiography of Malcolm X, published posthumously in 1965. The memoir provides no discussion of the importance of Black women radicals such as Louise Little, Vicki Garvin, and Queen Mother Moore in cultivating Malcolm's politics from his childhood through his tenure in the Nation of Islam. The erasure and marginality of women in the autobiography can be explained in part by the patriarchal gender politics embraced by Malcolm X and Alice Haley, the writer of the memoir. At the time they conducted the interviews that served as the basis for the text, Malcolm was still in the staunchly patriarchal Nation of Islam, and he had not begun to forge a more progressive position on gender as he would after his break from the Nation of Islam. And Haley was a conservative Black Republican who had little interest in Black nationalism and Pan-Africanism and who subscribed to traditional genders politics. So it goes on to say similarity in examination of women, gender, and sexuality in shaping Malcolm X's life remained largely absent and prevailing by archival portraits of him. This is most evident in the publication and controversy around historian Manny Marble's recent biography, Malcolm X, A Life of Reinvention. This work provides more attention to women than the autobiography and other biographies, but women still remain marginal to the story, with Vicki Garvin and Queen Mother Moore rendered completely absent. Given Marble's long-standing commitment to Black feminism, the absence of women voices, and sophisticated gender analysis in Malcolm X, A Life of Reinvention is curious. The tragedy and untimely death of Marble only days before the biography release will prevent us from ever knowing fully the answer to this matter. All right, so again, if you can read this, the name of the article is "If You're in a Country That's Progressive, the Woman is Progressive: Black Women Radicals and the Making of the Politics and Legacy of Malcolm X." All right, by Eric McDuffie and Kamalzi Woodard, and it could be found on this website, jster.org. All right, so let me go over here to the comment section. All right, so someone put, Malcolm became more socialist leaning towards the end of his life. Right, he became that, and he also became the Pan-Africanist as well. Because you got, if you remember or if you recall, that he had started the organization with Dr. John Henry Clark. But yes, you're right, he did lean towards socialism. After traveling to various places, especially in Africa and going into the Middle East and all that, he started to develop socialist ideology. But that wasn't the first time he encountered socialism or communism, because Vicki Garvin was one of the first to introduce him to the Socialist Party, to the Communist Party. She was trying to get him on board, but he wasn't down for the cause at all. She was trying to get him and Red Fox to be a part of it. And then plus, and a lot of people don't know that Malcolm grew up as a Garveyite because of his father and his mother. Both his parents were Garveyite. They were supporter of Garvey. So that was already ingrained into him. However, when his father died and his mother could not be there to care for him, he started going to a different route and got involved into the street life. Got involved going in and out of the club, gambling, pimping, whatever you name. That was Malcolm. Okay, that was Malcolm. Then later on, he started to become introduced to the Nation of Islam due to his siblings, because he had a brother named Reginald. His brother was involved in the Nation of Islam first, and then he introduced Malcolm to it. Okay. And then, of course, Malcolm's sister on his dad's side, she was a member of the Nation of Islam. Then she got into the Sunni Islam, so he kept in touch with her. So I did a video about Ella Collins, which was his sister. All right, she was one of the main people that kept in touch with Malcolm, helped Malcolm go to places like Africa and the Middle East, etc. She was the one that was paying for his trips and all of that. So a lot of women did play important roles in his life. We don't know exactly why they didn't want to put it on there in his autobiography. Maybe, again, he was standing on the patriarchal point of view of the Nation of Islam, because he came from that. They sent around patriarch concept. And, of course, Alice Haley was a conservative, so that's part of why they didn't decide to, put all that information in the book. But, yeah. But you know what? I think he did talk a little bit about his sister in his book. He did. He spoke a little bit about his sister. But, yeah, he didn't speak about the other women, but he have spoken something about his older sister on his dad's side. Let's go on to the next information. So basically, it's books that I have. This book right here, as you can see, is called Want to Start a Revolution: Radical Women in the Black Freedom Struggle. Okay. By Kamazi Woodard and Devayo F. Gord and Jeannie the Harris. All right, so let's go down to here on page 72. Talking about from communist politics to black power, the visionary politics and transnational solidarity of Victoria Vicki Emma Garvin. All right, so let's go down to here. All right. On this page, it says, as a recounter in this collection introduction, when listing the key figures in Ghana's expatriate community during the 1960s, writer Leslie Lacey referenced Vicki Garvin, a longtime labor activist and black radical, as one of the people to see if you want to start a revolution. While several recent studies on black power politics have acknowledged Vicki Garvin's activism and transnational travels, she is often mentioned only as a representative figure, a radical trade unionist, or a survivor of McCarthyism, with little attention given to specific details of her life and political contribution. Yet Vicki Garvin played a leading role in the 6 decades of struggle that marked the shift from Negro civil rights to Black liberation, politicized in the upheavals of Depression era Harlem and active in the U.S. left well into the 1980s. Garvin provides an important window for understanding the significant channels of influence between the old left and the new left, and between black radicalism and the black freedom struggle. Hey, Pure Black, how you doing? Peace to you. Thank you for coming through. Shout out to Mr. Black Coach over here, and shout out to Chauncey Moore. Shout out to y'all. Okay, so it says Vicki Garvin arrived in Africa in 1961 as a single woman, a seasoned organizer, and a radical intellectual who preserved through McCarthyism the government-supported political repression of the U.S. left during the late 1940s and 1950s, with her political commitments intact. Even as her spirit were tattered, she had served as leadership in several national organizations, of course, including for the Congress of Industrial Organization, United Office, and Professional Workers of America Union. And that's a picture of her right here as she's speaking in 1949 at a convention in Harlem, New York. That's her. All right. So it says a founding member of the National Negro Labor Council and a member of the editorial board of Paul Robeson Freedom newspaper. In the 1970s, after almost 10 years of living in Ghana and China, Garvin returned to Newark and New York to work alongside a younger generation of activists in the New Left and Third World Solidarity movements. Okay, so it says recent scholarship has begun to acknowledge the role of Black leftists such as Harry Haywood and Nelson Perry, or journals such as Freedom Waves in the development of student radicalism and the New Left in the 1960s and 1970s. However, few scholars have addressed the important influence that Vicki Garvin and other Black women radicals had in channeling political knowledge from the U.S. Communist Party affiliated Black left to transnational solidarity efforts in Ghana and China, and back to the Marxist fashions in the Student for a Democratic Society and Black nationalist politics of the National Black United Front. Garvin's life is part of the untold story of Black liberation politics in a global arena. Her distinct political legacy rests not in official titles, but in revolutionary experience and solidarity efforts that have always combined local organizing with a global vision. Okay. So it also say, in examining Vicki Garvin's long history of activism, this chapter challenged some of the dominant narrative that informed the historiography of Black radicalism. First, Garvin's ability to operate as a significant radical voice during the height of Cold War anti-communism remained politically active well into the 1980s, not only calls for a more nuanced understanding of the impact of U.S. Cold War politics on the Black left, but also highlights some central continuities in Black radical politics from the 1950s to the 1970s. Second, Garvin's lifetime of engaged activism provides a powerful example of a long-distance runner and the difficult and at times costly work that is crucial to sustaining a radical movement in the United States. Finally, Garvin's leadership and radical vision, as reflected in her organizing work present an important counterpoint to still dominant tendency to depict Black radicalism more as an ideology defined by great text and fury speeches than as a movement sustained through institution and organizing. Okay, so you guys can read this section in this book that goes into more about you can read this section. It's chapter 3, from communist politics to Black power, visionary politics and transnational solidarity of Victoria Vicki Garvin by Dale F. Gord. Okay. All right. So that's this book right here. Want to start a revolution. And then this book is called Radicalism at the Crossroad. Radicalism at the Crossroad, African American Women Activists in the Cold War by Dale F. Gord, the same author that wrote that section, right, in the previous book. So race and gender at work, from the labor journalism of Marvel Cookie to Vicki Garvin and the National Negro Labor Council from 1935 to 1956. Okay, so real quick, let's look at this. It says, it is the burning desire of every Negro woman to be free, to live and work in dignity on equal terms with all other workers. Negro women are eager to undertake a greater role to give substance to freedom and democracy, to help build an America of peace and abundance. Okay, and that came from Vicki Garvin, Freedom in 1950. So it goes on to say, thunderous applause greeted Vicki Garvin as she rose to issue the open remarks at the National Negro Labor Council founding convention on October 27, 1951 in Cincinnati. We are making history here today, Garvin proclaimed as the first official speaker of the meeting that brought together more than 1,000 Black and white labor activists. Referencing the organizer vision of merging the struggle for civil rights and the fight for better jobs in industry for Negro women and Negro men and women. Garvin went on to proudly declare this convention a major development in the struggle of the Negro people for freedom and equality. Garvin's hopeful outlook reflected her own investment in the NNLC, introduced by the convention chairman, Sam Park, who celebrated her as the person who has done more, in my opinion, than any one individual in order to make this convention possible. Garvin had been involved in the organization since its inception at the 1950 National Conference of Negro Labor Council in Chicago. She also served as the lead member of the Convention National Planning Committee and would go on to provide central leadership for numerous NNLC campaigns. Garvin, however, was not alone in her optimism for the national organization, which established its main office in Detroit. In reporting on the convention for masses and mainstream, Yvonne Gregory wrote, "If I had to choose one word to fit the mood of the meeting, the hand claps, the speeches, the listening, the doing, I would choose the word gleeful. The enthusiasm with which many labor activists welcomed the founding of the NNLC suggests its unique position within a labor movement that increasingly marginalized left leadership during the 1950s. The NNLC unapologetic affiliation with CP members clearly limit its influence. But for many left-leaning labor activists who were committed to building multiracial and mixed gender fighting unions, the organization commitments to racial and gender equality and to active grassroots organizing provide a much needed and inspiring alternative." All right. And it says this proved especially true for Black women active in the U.S. labor movement. The NNLC maintained a keen emphasis on organizing Black women workers and emerged as a crucial hub for Black women labor activists. The NNLC attention to women workers reflected in part a response to the shifting dynamics of the U.S. labor force. The 1940s and 1950s marked a key period in the rise of women to position of leadership within labor unions. And there was an increasing emphasis among African American women on addressing the intersecting forces of race, gender, and economic discrimination. As one Black woman declared from the floor of the NNLC convention, Negro women are on the offensive. We're on that other seat on the freedom train driving when that other man goes to sleep. Taking on leadership roles and theorizing around the race and gender politics of labor, Black women radicals helped to carve out spaces for continued resistance. They strove to sustain an alternative radical voice in a U.S. labor movement whose top leadership had, for the most part, conceded to Cold War conservatism. Focusing on the labor journalism of Marvel Cook, who detailed the plight of Black women domestic workers as an investigative reporter for the Daily Compass, and the labor activism of Vicki Garvin from her work with the UOPWA and her writings in Freedom to her leadership in the NNLC. This chapter documents the political and intellectual contribution of these women radicals to developing a more expansive labor politics. Okay. All right. So again, if you guys want to check this book out, the name of it's called Radicalism at Crossroads. African American Women Activism in the Cold War. Dayo F. Gord. Again, the author's name is Dayo F. Gord. All right. So I'm going to show you guys the sources again. Okay. Want to Start a Revolution. That's the name of the book. Radicalism at the Crossroads, African American Women Activism in the Cold War. And here's the article. If you're in a country that's progressive, the woman is progressive, Black women, radicals, and the making of the politics and legacy of Malcolm X. And you can find it on jster.org, which stands for Journal Storage. Okay. All right. And so that's it. So that's all I have for today. And I thank you all for tuning in, watching. I really appreciate that a lot. And so let me close it out with my own few words here. Women have played an integral part of the revolution, especially when it comes to liberation of African descended people. Women have always been on the front line. Women have put up a fight. So although I don't like the feminist movement at all, I don't like the feminist movement because of the direction they are at today. But at that time period, I could see why there were those who were on the rise of Black feminism. Okay, I could see why there were those women who came forth and spoke about the gender inequality and all, because of the fact that many women were not gaining enough respect and recognition for the work they had contributed to the community. Okay. And it's still somewhat like that to this day. Hey, brother Unc, how you doing? Nice. It's good seeing you, brother Unc. Long time. And it's still happening to this day. It's still happening to this day that you see a lot of gender inequality. I have to be honest. It's still happening. But it is done in a more subtle manner. It's not done like out in the open as it was at one point in time. So it's done differently, but it's still there. Okay. But this woman went through not only dealing with gender inequality, but racial inequality as well. But she was managed to put her focus on workers' right. So if it wasn't for people like Vicki Garvin and many others that came before her, there wouldn't be a bunch of black people today fighting for unions or getting involved in communism and socialism organizations. So she has opened up that door. She has opened that door of opportunity for other women, especially those women in the Black Panther Party. I mean, she has brought that inspiration to them. Now, they may not say that, but just look at that. Look at her influence. This was nonstop. This woman, it was nonstop. This woman put her life on the line, traveling, educating, teaching foreigners how to speak English, meeting with the leaders in other countries, organizing organizations and unions. And then when she came back to the United States, she was still doing a lot more work in her old age, mentoring young people that were part of the Black Power movement. She was doing a lot of work. So again, I could see why those women felt the way they did, because it was like women that did not earn respect from the male counterparts for the work they have done in the community. You could see, if you ever go back and watch the old films of the Civil Rights March, you will see a lot of women on that forefront. I mean, getting sprayed with hose, getting dragged in the street. Now, some of us might sit back and say, well, the women shouldn't be out there fighting. That should be the men doing all the fighting. The women should be at home somewhere. They should have been at home with the kids. It's not a safe thing. Well, yes, we can agree on that, but at the same time, it was so much pressure on both Black men and women that they came together and fought. They came together and marched. It was so much pressure. So the women put themselves out there and they fought. They did that. They stood on the long side with the men. They did that during slavery. They stood on the long side with their men. So yeah, it's easy to say that the woman should stay at home and not do this and not do that and etc. It's easy to say that, but until you can put yourself in their shoes, you can't really say that. See, you deal with a 21st century type of thinking. You're not living in that time of the 1940s or 1950s or 60s, okay? Because that was the worst time period. The Jim Crow era, that we talking Jim Crow. So both Black men and women alike want to fight against this oppression. They want to make their voices heard. They want to march. So yes, of course, the women took it upon themselves to do it. They could have sat at home, but they said, no, we're not going to do this. We're going to say something too. We got a voice. We got a voice. We got a right to stand up against this. And that was their attitude. That's the way they felt. They want to be a part of the liberation of the struggle for their own people. And we got to give credit, and especially me as a young Black woman myself, or a semi-middle-aged woman. I'm not a middle-aged woman yet, but me as a Black woman myself, I have to give credit. I have to give thanks. I have to give thanks to the women that came before me, because that brought inspiration to me. I mean, I'm not out there in the forefront fighting and all of that stuff, but it inspired me to be able to go read up and be more educated and realize that there was more to Black women than what we see today on television. There's more to us. There's more than just sitting around on reality shows and videos and sports and all of that. There was women who really dedicated their lives to activism, to arts, to the STEM programs, to education, government, literature. It's a long list. And that's why when Women History Month comes around, I'm very excited. I'm very intrigued to do it. I'm so excited to do these things because it's like I have to put my women ancestors on the line first. We got to show that these group of women, the long list of women, they have done tremendous work and they were so underrated. They were unrecognized, unparalleled. But now today, the state of Black men and Black women, it makes it hard for us to really organize because we got this mentality that now we got the gender bias going on. You know, and Kevin Samuel, he passed away. So ever since he passed away, a lot of men started to act, they started to go crazy, whatever. Oh, he's the Godfather. Oh, he was Godfather. This a Godfather what? A Godfather of dogging Black women out. That's what he was. But that's a whole nother topic. I ain't even gonna really go too much there. But what we see now is more gender bias and more dichotomy amongst men and women. That's what we see. And it makes it so hard for us to even organize and come on to one understanding and come on a common ground because of so much differences. And we're not trying to understand each other differences. That's the sad part. We're not trying to understand the struggle of the man, and the man don't seem to want to understand the struggle of the woman, or he doesn't care to want to understand it. So now we're like this. We're like this constantly. And you're going nowhere with it. You're not going anywhere. What the hell are you benefiting? It's like you going in circles. You're going in circles, but you ain't got no type of solution. You ain't got no type of practical solution to what you can do. You got a bunch of ideologies, but you can't come down to one solution. You can't come down to one solution. So now you got women that come lean towards this new feminist wave that's bringing a bunch of BS, a bunch of nonsense. And then you got this manosphere madness going on. And nobody can bring a solution. Nobody can really talk about or be into a serious discussion about what happened up there in Buffalo, New York. Nobody can really do that. And that should be a big topic of the conversation of what happened in Buffalo, New York. That should have been a topic. And just recently, a sister in South Carolina got killed by the police. Her name was Kayla Gary, Kayla Gary from South Carolina. Yeah, Kayla Gary was killed at the age of 26. These are the type of things that should bring more enlightenment to us. But we don't even take the time out. We don't even want to have those conversations. We too be worried about Kevin Samuel and what his philosophy was. And all the rest of them. That's what we worry about. We want to bring gender bias. We want to bring dichotomy. And we ain't getting no damn well with it. We just talking in circles. We just look stupid on both sides. And that's one of the reasons why I stepped away from them gender topics. Because when you start talking about accountability, when you start having a serious conversation, nobody wants to hear it. Everybody want to talk over each other. Nobody want to hear somebody's point of view. One gender think they better than the other gender. It's just too much. It's too much ambiguity. It brings a lot of enigma. It brings a lot of problem, chaos. So, yeah. But to continue, thank you all for watching my channel. That's all I have to say. And I hope you all have a good one. I hope you all be safe. And for those of you just coming in, please watch the video from the beginning. All right. You ain't got to watch it all the way through, but I encourage you to do so. But if you don't want to watch it all the way through, you can go ahead and skip some, and that's fine. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with it. But I encourage you to watch it all the way through. But if you don't want to, then that's fine. That's on you. All right. So please be safe. Be careful out here. Until next time, I will connect with you all later on another topic. So peace and power elevation be to everyone. This your girl Tiffany, and I'm logging off saying deuces. And once again, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like the channel, share the channel, etc. And that's it. All right. Peace.